All right, so I am real excited to be here. Got in last night and just got over here the first thing this morning, and excited to see so many faces. And these kind of events I always enjoy presenting at. Myself, I'm also a college professor or adjunct part-time faculty, but the students call me professor. So I tell my parents I'm a professor at a college, and my mother loves that. So she goes around and tells all of her friends, "My son, the professor." But I'm also the IAC Squared Central Florida chapter president. So I run a chapter in Central Florida, which is where I live, down in Orlando, about 30 minutes from the Mouse House. So I know what it takes to put on one of these events. So I think I got to say, but a big round of applause for Nick, for Bill, and everybody. That was a small round, but we'll save the big round for when I'm done talking, and then you guys can do the big round. That'll be cool. So I spent 18 years working for a little German company called Siemens. Did a lot of things, everything from database administration to programming to networking to network security, building VPNs, built up our whole infrastructure for remote access for monitoring our power plants. We're kind of like the OnStar for power plants back then. And got into security. And somebody goes, you should get your CISSP. I went, my CI what? And that was 14 years ago. And so now I've been working in security ever since. And about 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago today, I started at KnowBe4. So today's my 3-year anniversary, and I'm hanging out with all of you. So this is great. Thank you. Let's hope that doesn't keep doing that. So yeah, with being at KnowBe4, pretty well, I get to talk about cybersecurity all the time, every day, everywhere. I do it at college with the students, kind of helping that next generation of professionals. Who in here is a student? Not a student of life, but a college student. Okay, cool. So those of you that had their hand up, everybody else, make sure you connect with them, because one of the things that I strive with my chapter, and one of the things we always talk about, is getting connected with the people in your community, because you never know who you're going to meet one day that's going to help you get that job down the road. Because my job at KnowBe4 is a result of Eric Krohn and Javad Malik, both are other advocates. Both came to me, and I've known them for years, meeting at conferences, became good friends. And they said, "Hey, we have this opening for an evangelist. Do you want to come and do this?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, let's go." And lo and behold, but because of networking and getting to know folks and meeting the people in your community and in this industry, it certainly goes a long way. So I encourage all the students in here, get to know the other folks, and whether through mentoring or whatever else. So I also run a podcast. I produce our Security Masterminds podcast at KnowBe4. Lots of fun with that. Our new episode came out today, but I'll talk about that later on. Of the working professionals in here, anybody have KnowBe4? You are use KnowBe4 for security awareness training? Cool. All right. So some of you, so the rest of you, potential customers. Great. Now, my job isn't sales, and that's one of the reasons I love this job, is I'm not here to sell you anything. My job here is to light the fire, and what we're talking about today with regard to ransomware and Conti. But with being at KnowBe4, the big thing for me is enabling people to make smarter security decisions every day. Bottom line, plain and simple. That's what I want to do, whether it's working professionals, whether it's students, whether it's kids, whether it's, we say senior citizens, but I like to say the life experienced, because they don't like being called senior citizens, I guess. But getting them to make smarter security decisions. And so it starts with all of us and helping educate. We hear the phrase, humans are the weakest link. They're always clicking on links, opening up attachments. And for me, and I throw this back at IT and InfoSec folks when they say that, is like, they're the biggest attack vector. If you think they're the weakest link, then we're not educating them enough. So that's certainly what I try to do when I'm out and about and visiting. So today, the presentation, and I've been told I've got like 2.5 hours, which is great, because I've got 400 slides to get through. No. I've got another 50 minutes to go. So what we're going to go through and talk about today is ransomware, and specifically looking at the ransomware that the Conti group were doing earlier this year, based off of the chat information that got released and other information that's been made available over the last couple of years. And just to give you some insight, with regards to how they do their attacks, how they operate. Society likes to think that the hackers, and I like to say cyber criminals, because hackers are good people too. Hackers are people that like to take things apart, figure out how they work, and put them back together again. So society has the stigma of the hackers are the people sitting in their basement, their parents' basements with the hoodies on, and that's certainly not the case that we found with regards to Conti and the other cyber criminal groups that are out there. So when we look at, kind of the new normal, like I said, I joined KnowBe4 3 years ago, and it was in November of 2019 where we started seeing a shift with regards to ransomware. Ransomware has been around since 1989. Dr. Joseph Papp did one where he put out he had a floppy disk. Those of you, I see some people in here know what a floppy disk, and I think some other people in here probably were born after floppy disks were stopped being used. But he had a floppy disk, and he was going to a conference. It was back then in the late 80s. AIDS was a huge epidemic going on. And he showed up to one of these conferences. He had 50 of these floppy disks, and he showed up to this AIDS conference, and he had a document on there. At that point, I think it wasn't Word. It was WordPerfect doc. But he had written some code that was behind it that if somebody put the floppy disk in their computer, it would run a program, and it would keep track of how many times that program ran. And when the program got up to or the application had been opened, the Word doc had been opened about 50 times, he then went through and encrypted, and I do that in air quotes for a particular reason, because what he did is he just changed the extensions on all the files. So all the DOC or WPF files, PDF, whatever it was, he just changed the extension. Back in 89, a lot of people that were just starting to use computers didn't really have a good understanding of the extensions, and so they thought their files were encrypted. And he left you a little note that said, hey, if you want your files decrypted, send $400 or $500 to this PO box in Panama. And so the first time he went to go collect his money from the PO box in Panama, the FBI were waiting for him. Interestingly enough, he got off on an insanity plea. He ended up dying, I think about 10 years ago, but he ended up doing a whole study on butterflies after that, how he goes from one to the other. But that's kind of that first case of ransomware, and it's come a long way. Once we had the change with cryptocurrency coming out, once Bitcoin starts coming on the scene, cyber criminals are realizing, hey, instead of asking for gift cards or asking for Western Union wire transfers, we can get them to do Bitcoin, because at least then it's not very easily can be traced. We can have a certain anonymity with it. And then once we get it in, we can then start moving the money around between all the different exchanges. So Bitcoin comes in, they're using cryptocurrency now for the ransoms. But even then, early 2010s, teens, they are encrypting the systems, and but they're doing it very quickly. They're getting in, they get into the system, whether through RDP, whether exposed systems that aren't patched, whether phishing, social engineering, and they get in, find the data, drop the malware, and off they go. Some of them were doing it as quick as 30 minutes from time of getting in to dropping the malware, the ransomware, and getting out. After a while, everyone's talking, oh my gosh, make sure you got your backups, have backups, and you'll be all right from ransomware. Oh yeah. Don't forget to test the backups, because a lot of times people would go and recover from their backups and they would be missing 6 months, or it would fail on them. So now you've got them coming in. It's more of a nuisance attack with ransomware, because you lose one system or a couple systems. Then we get WannaCry in 2017, and then it escalates with worms, and so they're evolving the ransomware game as they go along. Then we get to November of 2019. And we start seeing a lot of changes there with Maze, with Clop. Revo was coming on the scene as well. And what ended up happening is they were getting into your system, and now they start exfiltrating your data. Now they start looking at, okay, let's take your data and hold that for ransom. And this evolves and starts changing the game completely. Now we're to the point where they're doing multiple types of extortions. They're coming in, they're stealing the databases, they're stealing client lists, employee information. They're going after C-suite. They're actually contacting the C-suite. They're contacting employees that work for the organization saying, hey, we've got your data. If you give us $300, we will we'll delete the information. Because if the organization is not going to pay, you even had some doctors, medical practices, it was in South Florida, plastic surgeon, where the ransomware group got in, stole all the patient information. They got like x-rays and all kinds of sensitive information. And they went to the doctor and said, all right, hey, you're going to, it's, 3,000, 10,000, 50,000, whatever the ransom was. And they didn't want to pay. So then the cyber criminal said, okay. So then they went after the patients. And they said to the patients, we've got all this data on you. And this guy was a plastic surgeon. So no doubt they've got before and after pictures. And they basically said, give us $300 and we'll delete your data. And that's kind of the extent of where they are now. Now, as we got at the end of last year with Q4, we started seeing a decline. And everyone was thinking, woohoo, all right, we got ransomware beat. It's starting to decline. And then in the new year, it ramped back up again. I think they were just taken off for Christmas, but the increase comes up. But while we're not seeing as many, we're seeing more targeted types of attacks. We're seeing specific to organizations, going after supply chain, going after organizations that provide a lot of services. We think back to SolarWinds, right in the middle of the pandemic, but the SolarWinds with attacking the supply chain and being able to get into so many organizations, cyber criminals are starting to do that as well. But what ends up cropping out of that is what we have is ransomware as a service. You've got a lot of these different groups that have the expertise, but now you get to the point where it's like, okay, I don't need to know how to, launch the ransomware malware. All I need to do is provide a list of names or email addresses, and they can have the whole application that can do it. So now it makes it even easier for me to launch a ransomware attack against an organization, where you've got like menus, and then you've got different tiers that are set up for those. You can sit there and, depending on how much money or how much of the program you're going to use will depend on how much you get. And, to the point where it's like, all right, you get 70% of the money, but we're keeping 30% for you to use the tool. So it makes it a lot easier for the cyber criminals out there that don't need a lot of technical experience, a lot of technical expertise. And they've even got, some of them even have YouTube videos. Philadelphia, one of the groups, has their own YouTube video that you can find. It was out in 2017 that demoed how to actually use the program. So these groups actually even have their own marketing folks as well. Has anybody experienced a ransomware attack? That wants to admit it? Got a couple. Okay, cool. Thank you for being honest. So what I'm going to show you here real quick, and it's playing, good. This is a video that I recorded with my class that I teach. And every semester I do a section on ransomware. And I decided one year, what happens if I could, if I could actually launch a ransomware attack on my own virtual machine and show them what it's like. And so that's what I'm doing here. And what you see here in the folder in the front is the ransomware samples that I downloaded through torrent. And I love it. I launched the application and then it goes, are you sure you want to run this? Because this doesn't look like it's safe. So I launched the program here at this point, and I've got about 40 gigabytes worth of data on this hard drive. And you can see the icons, and they just changed. So pretty well less than 10 seconds it took to encrypt the data on this virtual machine. About, like I said, 40 gigabytes of data. And it goes through, and I actually had I don't do it in this video, but I actually had a text file on the desktop that got encrypted. I opened it up and the students could see, yep, all the data inside is actually encrypted. You can't access it. I show them, you get the little ransomware note because cyber criminals want to get paid. And so they give you the note, they give you the instructions, they give you the key. You got to go get the Tor browser. You got to go get some Bitcoin or Ethereum or however they want to get paid. They give you the address and they give you all that to you. I mean, it's more customer service than you get with some other organizations that are legit. I mean, some ransomware groups even have a online call center that you can chat with people online to get whatever it is, pay up, negotiate, or do whatever. So pretty well within about a minute, my whole system has now been infected, hit with the ransomware. So it moves pretty quick. And when we have dwell times in systems that are, 80 days, and this gets done in a matter of minutes. So just wanted to give everybody an insight on how quick it actually happens. There is technology out there, the big, I know we got Sophos here, that they can stop a lot of this, they see the files changing so they can stop it on one system before it spreads and gets around to other systems. So That just to kind of baseline everybody there with regards to ransomware. Now, the title of the presentation you saw is called Ransomware, Ransom War, and Ransomware. So what I'm really curious is, does anybody know how the hackers got away from the FBI? Yeah, they ran somewhere. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. I'm not going to confirm or deny. There's more of those in this presentation, so you just kind of have to wait and see. All right. And I have plenty more that's inside this deck. I have a whole YouTube channel of me telling dad jokes, so I'll share that with you at the end as well. I have a sign in my office at home that says "Dad Jokes Told Here," and my daughters gave it to me. So it's you know you're doing right when the kids give you things to support your crazy habit. So anyway, so we're going to talk about Conti, kind of their overview and their organization, how they did things, their tactics, techniques and procedures, how they were doing their TTPs. And then we'll talk about some defensive things and also some of the reasoning behind why they did what they did with regards to the ransomware attacks. So let's look at Conti overall. Conti is a Russian-based cybercriminal group, essentially. Bottom line, plain and simple. They were making well over $100 million a year in the years that they were operating. Their biggest heist, I think, was $180 million they got out of one organization with regards to that. With a lot of the cybercriminal groups that are out there, especially in ransomware, they all have particular sectors they like to target. When you look at CrowdStrike's got a great map that they have available. You can Google it and go check it out, where it shows all the different groups and what they like to target, whether it's energy, whether it's critical infrastructure, whether it's healthcare, education, government systems. Each of these different groups have their own particular sector they like to target. They'll hit anybody, but usually they find that they will go after a certain sector to get what they want with regards to it. What we have here is kind of a breakdown of how the different groups were doing monetary wise. Conti basically hit over 1,000 different organizations by January of this year. And the payouts were always in the millions and millions of dollars. I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, but Costa Rica was one of the last big ones that they hit. The actual country, the government of Costa Rica. When we look at who they were targeting, a lot of the times it was the US. 50% of the attacks here are looking at US, Canada, the UK, European, basically the West. There's a statement I'm going to show you here in a second from them, which kind of explains what they were doing. But when we look at the industry, they were going after manufacturing, legal, retail, construction, and finance. Now, when we look at how organizations do based on a sector, finance does really, really well because they've been trying to keep the bad guys, the cyber criminals, out for years, because cyber criminals are in it for one thing and one thing only, and that's to make money. And so, why do bank robbers rob banks? Because that's where the money is. And so cyber criminals like to go after the finance. That's why we've seen so many attacks recently on crypto exchange organizations, because that's where the money is, and they can go in and gain access, steal credentials, and look at stealing the money. But for Conti, they were going after the manufacturing organizations, law offices. A lot of these particular sectors don't have a deep set of information security professionals in the organization or IT. They might be using an MSP or managed service providers to handle all the IT and security stuff. And so for them, they found that they were able to get access into those particular organizations, and so continue to target them, manufacturing being the big one. So then on February 24th, that's when things changed. As we know, that's when we had the beginning of the Ukraine or when Russia marched into Ukraine and the start of the Ukraine-Russia war that's going on. The next day, we get Conti coming out and defending Russia and basically saying, we fully support the Russian government and what they're doing. If anyone attacks Russia, we will strike back. And I think either some people in their organization weren't too keen on that, but essentially they ended up coming out the next day and going, okay, well, we're not allying with any particular government per se, but we are going against all the Western warmongers because of what America stands for. I got to later on. I'm going to show you an interview with one of the ransomware operators, and they have a comment in there which is hysterical. But I don't want to spoil the surprise. So basically, they're going through and they're saying that we're not allying with Russia, but we are against anything that goes on in the West because they don't like it. What ends up happening after this, the next day on February 27th, is we have this Twitter account that pops up called Conti Leaks, and they basically released 160,000 entries with regards to their chat program, their internal chat program that they used in Conti, which was called Jabber. They released all of it, and then they started posting all the files and having links using an anonymous file service. They started posting all of the data that was out there. And from that, we got an excellent glimpse into the world of the cybercriminal ransomware operators, how they were operating, what they were doing, how they were set up. And essentially, with these 160,000 internal messages, they went all the way back to January of 21, all the way through to pretty well that day. They were able to release all that information along with data relating to the source code for their malware, videos, pretty well everything that they were using to operate with regards to their environment. So when we look at Conti, they were essentially a ransomware as a service group. They were providing the tools and capabilities for cyber criminals to provide the email addresses or the access into an organization, and then these guys would take over. They would have their software that would be able to go in. So they were always managing the malware. They had their ransomware malicious software that would be in there. They were always updating it because, as we've seen pretty well over the years, when you've got cyber criminals coming in with their antivirus, then the patterns get updated by the antivirus providers, the EDR providers. So then they've got to update. So it's constantly a cat and mouse game. And so they had people that were going through and updating that, maintaining the Onion website so they could post all the information that they had stolen. They had their affiliates. You think of this like a business, because that's one of the things that came out of this was this group operated like a small to medium business. And they had an HR, they had marketing. They even had like a partner program where they'd have folks affiliated with them that would go out and get that access for them. But when we look at a breakdown of the chats, and this is kind of like a mind map of all the different communications of everybody. And what we had here, you have a variety of different folks. You've got Stern, who's doing a lot of the talking in here, and pretty well he was the leader of the organization. Then you've got Defender, one of the tech administrators. You got Berkeley, who's the developer doing R&D work. You had Mango, who was kind of like a team lead. And then you had Boz, who another lead. One of the things that when I first got into IT many, many years ago, back in the 90s, one of the first jobs I had was working at a tech call center. I worked for an outsourcer. We did tech support for Dell. And the turnover rate in that place was quite high. But I managed to stay there for about 3 years because the building was only 10 minutes from my house, and any other job I was getting was always on the other side of town and not for any more money. So I ended up staying with this organization for about 3 years and worked my way up. And as I look at the business model for this, I see a lot of similarities to what my time was like working at this call center, working at the Dell Tech Support call center. And, you have these different groups. You have, just like any organization, you got an HR, you've got your coders, your testers, you got your sysadmins, people that are maintaining the systems overall with regards to the web servers and where they're storing their data. You got your code reversers, you've got your researchers, pen testers, you've got folks that are doing OSINT work. And then of course you have your third party. So even these organizations have third party groups they're working with that handle the spamming, the different bots that we're using, whether it was TrickBot or Emotet. So they're collaborating just like a small or medium business that we would have in the everyday world. For me, looking at this, when it came to these different groups and looking at it. With my experience at a call center, you had people that your level 1 techs, and then you had your level 2 techs, and then you'd have your level 3. And the same thing applies within these organizations. Within Conti, they had 60 to 100 people. And essentially you would have them going through, and you'd have your one folks that would get you access into the organization. Then you'd have the other people that would come along, and they would be doing the level 1 exploitation, doing the lateral moves throughout the network. Then they would be doing you'd have your level 3 ones if they ran into a brick wall, and so on and so forth. So you've got all these different levels of expertise, as well as recruiting. You've got an HR department going out and looking for people to come and work. And we would always think that, oh my gosh, the level of sophistication that must be on this with regards to these folks isn't as quite as high as we might think that it is. This is all information that we're finding out based within the chats, the communications between the different groups, and essentially realizing that, holy cow, this is just like any other type of business. Yeah, I apologize. The lights kind of make it difficult to see on the dark, but basically this is a chat, one of the snapshots of the chat, but this is focusing more on where they want to harvest the data. This is early days for them, where they just want to get out there, get as much data as they can, rather than targeting specific organizations. And basically this was a conversation with regards to a particular organization. The name was masked. This came from Orange Defense when they went through and did their analysis, and basically coming back and saying that this particular organization, they're looking just to get as much data as they can. Maybe we can get it, and then they decide to move on. It's not all virtual. So with this particular conversation, they had offices. They're not just all working from home and sitting in their parents' basements. No, there were actual buildings that they had that they would go to work. Over the time, it was discovered there were like 3 or 4 different offices. And here you have a conversation by somebody who's texting in going, hey, could somebody open the door? Hit the door hard. Just be careful. It's painted. Don't get dirty. That's the conversation. Now, granted, that's been translated from Russian, but, trying to get into the office and, experience, we go up and we badge in and our badge doesn't work. Well, they were trying to open the door and they just had to bang it hard. The other one is like talking to your mom. She's a big romantic, big smiley face. In general, we were impressed by the meeting. So, everyday conversations that we would see even in our own work environment are certainly happening within the group as well. Here we have another conversation. Since you didn't know about the ban, they didn't issue a fine. Next time I will issue. Okay, but it's not a hospital. So here we have them targeting particular hospitals. And I remember in COVID, I think folks may remember as well, you had certain cyber criminal groups that were saying, okay, we're not going after the healthcare organizations because they're working on the vaccine for us so that we don't get sick. But then you still had other cyber criminal groups that didn't care because they enjoyed, that was their sector that they went after. They went after the healthcare. And this one, within this conversation, we're seeing that, well, they don't have any resuscitation. It's a sports hospital, so it's not, working on the vaccine kind of thing. But we studied them. When they go through and they end up figuring out which group that they've got in. So if they find out an organization that they've gained access into, they have a whole other department that does all the OSINT, the open source intelligence for them. And basically what they're doing is looking at that organization, looking at who works there. They're looking at what their profit loss is. They're looking up information on Google, using all the open information that's available online, and figuring out about as much information about the organization so they know how much they can charge them when they hit them with the ransomware. Down in Broward County in Florida, I don't think it was Conti, but there was another ransomware group that hit them up and wanted to charge them, I think it was $4 million. And this was a school system. And they had seen that the budget for the school was about $400 million. And so, sorry, it was $40 million because it was 10%. They were hitting them up for $40 million. So when they bring in the lawyers and the third-party organizations, they're negotiating with the cyber criminal group, and they're saying, look, we can't pay you $40 million. We don't have it. And they came back and said, look, here's all your information we have about you. We know you have a $400 million budget that you work from every year. You can pay us the $40 million. They ended up negotiating it down, believe it or not, down to about $400,000 because they had to show and work. They had their lawyers. They had some other security professionals in there. negotiating with the cybercriminal group. Again, they're just wanting to get paid, but they were able to negotiate because pretty well, yeah, they may have a $400,000 budget, but they don't have a surplus. They're not a profit-making organization. So granted, while the cybercriminal group knew it was a school, they were hoping to, get as much as they could out of them. Now, with regards to Conti, one of my favorite quotes that came out was our good friend Brian Krebs. Conti is a highly effective, if also remarkably inefficient cybercriminal organization. So you've got this organization that is sophisticated. They're getting in, they're encrypting data, they're making all this money, but their back office wasn't as good. They had systems that were expiring. Hello, we're out of Bitcoins, 4 new servers, 3 VPN subscriptions, and 22 renewals are out. Please send some Bitcoins to this wallet. You had that coming from Carter. They didn't have a lot of workflow management. They had all these systems that were standing up. They were probably spending a lot more money than they needed to because they weren't really aware that they were past due on some of the servers, on the domain registrations, because a lot of the time they would create fake domains for the phishing campaigns for the different organizations. And so what we're seeing here is, and it was the other one that's on there as well. Another server you effed up, it effed me up, $100 fine. Within the Conti group, you would be fined if you did something wrong. We do something wrong in our organization. Okay, our manager might pull us in, give us a talking to, and send us on. Don't do it again. You might get something written in your permanent record. They were fining their employees. Imagine if we find our employees, how much more productivity might happen. But they're going through and fining the employees. This one was a $100 fine for that. And those fines would all get put for bonuses, which is what we see here, them talking about this month, 3 people were fined for absenteeism and various mistakes that led to losses. These fines will go to the bonus fund for employees at the end of the month. So the employees that are doing the work right, these 60 to 100 people that are doing the work right, they're going to get the bonus. Whereas you've got other people that are slacking off. They're not coming into work, kind of like the same problems that we have in our environments here. I know working at the call center, my last year that I worked there, I worked my way up to management, I think because I was the only one that was still around after 3 years. And I just remember the hiring and firing process of that. You would have people that just didn't care. It was a job. It wasn't a career for them. And so they essentially were, didn't want to come into work, but they would be fined on a regular basis. So we see that morale is off within these organizations. You've got people that like to work. You got people that don't like to work. Saturday will be a day off, same as Sunday. Woohoo, hooray! We, and then they've got all the exclamation marks. The interesting thing that came out of Bentley's one of the coders that's in this group, and he said our work is generally not difficult, but it's monotonous. So it's very tedious. They're doing the same thing over and over and over every day, and that certainly gets to be draining on them. As they're making all this money, but the work is tedious. It takes a lot out of them, and certainly get a level of frustration that comes from them, from everybody that's in there. With regards to Bentley, he was always the one that was making sure that the code was up to date, making sure that they were using the latest malware, making sure they were evading the systems. Because one of the things when you first get into one of these environments, and I realized this when I was doing my own experiment with ransomware, especially on the older malware samples, they automatically get detected by Microsoft Defender. Did on my Windows machine. And it basically quarantined all my ransomware samples. So then I had to go back out and re-download them. So then before I realized I wanted to launch the ransomware, I had to figure out, okay, how do I disable the antivirus? So then I went out and Googled disable Microsoft Defender code. And I found a PowerShell script that I was able to run, and it disabled it. And even on a reboot, it disabled it again. So that's what they were doing, and having to constantly evolve and keep up with between the technology that was going on and be able to keep their systems running. So basically, Conti in here, $2.7 billion is what they accrued over the 2017. The biggest one they got, the biggest heist that they got was $180 million from one particular organization. They had about 60 to 100 employees working there. They were paid anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 in Bitcoin deposits a month. So But over in Russia, $1,000, $2,000 is probably a lot of money, because the folks that were working there were making more money as workers than they would working anywhere else. I have to imagine the upper folks, Bentley, Stern, Mango, and all them, they were bringing in the millions, but they were had a tight collaboration with the Emotet folks. They were using their criminal platforms as well. They were constantly having to maintain and update their infrastructure, and they were using a lot of commercial tools. And I'm going to go into those here in just a minute. But they were using services and a variety of different tools throughout the whole time they were running. Now, with all of this cybercrime, one of the things that's always kind of perplexed me is the fact that why hasn't Superman helped us fight any of this cybercrime? It's because he's afraid of cryptocurrency. I warned you. Okay, so let's talk about tactics, techniques, and procedures. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. So I have one of these cool little SanDisk 1 terabyte hard drives. And on this is about 50 gigs worth of all the Conti data. When I got my hands on the Conti data, the first thing I got my hands on last year was their playbook. It was posted on the dark web. I came across it and downloaded it. And I'm going to show you some of the pages from that. But when they had the massive, once you had all the files come out with their breach, along with the chats, there was also this directory that had a whole bunch of, you had crack 2019, crack in Russian, you had Metasploit for US, in English, Metasploit in Russian, you had network pen testing, Cobalt Strike, Windows red teaming, WMI attacks, attacking SQL servers, going after Active Directory, and then there was a range program. These were training videos that were on their servers that were from the Pen Testing Academy. You can actually go out and see them. The interesting thing that they'd done here was they had overdubbed it in Russian. So they're bringing in people that have, I have to imagine, a limited amount of computer experience. They may be just everyday folks that know how to use a computer, and they're bringing them in and they're training them. These are those entry-level cyber criminals, essentially, that they are targeting. They've even got a whole thing on Cobalt Strike, how to use Cobalt Strike. They have that training video that's in there. Interesting thing about Cobalt Strike, it's not cheap. And they invested, through the chats, it was discovered that Conti invested about $60,000 in Cobalt Strike, which when they're bringing in 100 million on average with these organizations, it's a drop in the bucket. But the licenses they got, they ended up spending $30,000 on the licenses. They gave another $30,000 to the organization to front them to get the licenses. So they're using the same tools that pen testers are using and going through. And then when they're bringing in their new recruits, they're putting them in front of the training videos and watching hours and hours and hours of training videos from the Pen Testing Academy. Now, when we look at how they did their attacks, we can always look at the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, and they do their reconnaissance. So they go through and do their initial investigations. They're going through and looking at, how are they getting in? The number one way, and even from our own experience, social engineering is kind of the common way that they get in. Or they're going in through remote desktop. Because of COVID, you had and I think a lot of us are going to probably be able to relate. When COVID hit and everybody had to start working from home, we need to be able to access the system. So they put a whole lot of RDP on the internet. One of the other fun things I like doing with my students is showing them Shodan. And we do, when we talk about OSINT. And I bring up Shodan every semester, and we do a search for TCP 3389, RDP, the Remote Desktop Protocol. And it's always interesting to see how many connections there are online. Last check, there was about 4.6 million RDP sessions connected on the internet. 1.5 of those belonged here in the US. And of those, a bunch of them are Amazon. And so they love going. So right out of the gate, you've got 1.5 million servers, 4.5 globally that cyber criminals can go after. Password guessing, they're doing, password credential stuffing, or they're exploiting systems overall. Once they get in, now they've turned it over to their next level of techs. They're looking at maintaining persistence. They're using other tools to keep that access and be able to go back in and then start looking at exfiltrating the data. And usually they're in there for about 80 days. Afterward, they run their ransomware, their exploit, and then hit them with the note and wait for payment. Now, this is out of the Hacker's Quick Start guide that they had in part of their documentation. And the highlight that I'm showing here, yeah, good. It says IT professionals with no such experience. So they're pretty well got folks that, aren't familiar with using it. Almost any network can be hacked. And if there are no known vulnerabilities and the entry points found, then you got to look for other ways. So you're going through social engineering, but they would always be trying the vulnerabilities first. That was their first part. So once they get access, they're looking at initial access with phishing, compromised O365 accounts. We have the comb that has also been discovered at this time. Your collection of massive breaches, where it's 8 billion passwords, over 4 billion usernames, accounts, passwords, driver's licenses, and so forth. They're using those to try and gain access, which is what happened with the Colonial ransomware attack last year, as well as the city of Oldsmar. Those were done with credential stuffing. They might be doing phishing, the voicemail phishing, or they're using software to get promotion through SEO, and then looking at other common vulnerabilities. When they go through and execute, they're basically looking for domain admins. They're looking for the Active Directory systems. They're disabling Windows Defender and any other EDR software they can get. They'll even use Kerberos. So that's targeting the Kerberos authentication system, bypassing that, using other, living off the land. They're using other proper services and applications that are out there, system journals, Mimikatz. But the three exploits listed here, you've got the SMB, Print Nightmare, and Zero Logon. Those were their favorite exploits to go after when they were getting in organizations to take advantage of. Because a lot of the times folks hadn't had those patched yet. So here's one of the pages out of the Conti playbook. And the first thing up at the top is talking about doing that research, then doing a dump of the shares. Once they're in on that one system, what are they connected to? Going from there. And then further pursuing Kerberos attacks, getting to the AD, getting the password hashes, doing Mimikatz. And then it's literally step by step of what they need to do to gain access into the environment. Then they're looking at destroying the backups, because we always said, from the FBI all the way to every other cybersecurity professional, make sure you got backups, make sure you test them. Well, then they were going through and looking for those backups and essentially deleting them and getting rid of them. And that would all happen just before the encryption part would happen. So other tools, Cobalt Strike was the big one. They even had their own scripts that they had written. You had Active Directory Find, Ad Find, Power View, Router Scan, looking for routers and trying to log in on there. They've got their own SQL injection tools. ngrok is a reverse proxy for remote desktop connections. AnyDesk, which is remote control software. Of course, they're using Tor and they're using Metasploit. They even wrote their own Metasploit scripts as well. The alias RC basically allowed them to generate other exploitation tools to run all at once. So they had the sophistication of the tools and the technology, as well as using Cobalt Strike. It got to the point where they were generating all kinds of money that you had the developers, they wanted to create their own forum environment. They wanted to create their own darknet, maybe even consider doing their own crypto overall. And so with all the money they've been making, that was kind of their next step where they had planned on going. But by early once they came out in 2022, and with some of the other attacks, they ended up having to put all that to the side. But with all these, they're doing all these attacks, and you've got all these against the websites, trying to create their own form and everything else on the website. I've always wondered, does anybody know where you take a web page when it's sick? The urologist? I heard one clap. That's good. That was good. They clapped and went, no, that wasn't funny. No. Okay. So I got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about some of the defensive techniques and some of the other things going on. So towards it was this year in April, you have Conti, they've come out in February and say, hey, we're against the West. We're kind of allying with Russia or not. But in April, they target the Costa Rican government. 30 different systems, 30 different institutions they targeted. They got access into their systems, their web pages, their social media. They ended up having to pretty well shut down all their computer systems in the government. And they even had a change in presidents. And he comes out after a month of dealing with this and trying to recover and basically declares war on Conti. Fast forward another month, and the Biden administration comes out and offers $10 million for information leading to people that are involved with Conti, with the different groups, key positions with Conti. Hey, we want you to, $5 million for those. So, and what we've seen in the past with other cyber criminal groups is they disbanded. And that's what ended up happening to Conti in May of this year. But it's kind of interesting because now you've got all these people that have worked underneath Stern and Mango and Bentley, and now they're all working at all these other cyber criminal groups like Avos Locker, Hive, Black Cat. So it's taking that knowledge and expanding it and passing it on. So while Conti, the name itself is gone because now that Conti doesn't exist, you can't go after Conti people because they're not with Conti, they're with these other groups. And then you get all these other groups that are growing as well. And essentially, we're dealing with a crime of extortion, and it's the how is secondary. How they're doing it, it's the fact that they want to continue to evolve and grow. Because essentially, and I already said it, is the fact that they do this for one thing and one thing only, and that's to make money. Granted, it's Bitcoin a lot of the time, but they're going through making money. But when we look at kind of a psychology of them, while they're targeting the West, for them, they feel like they're doing right. I don't condone it, but they've got a business they're running. They are, the intent that they have is, hey, if those organizations in the West aren't securing their networks and we can get in, well, that's on them. That's not us. Also, their charitable giving. Hey, we're taking the money that we're stealing from them and we're giving it to people that need it. And we look at the disinhibition factor. It's their war against the West. They're targeting it. They feel like they're on a just cause. Now, there was an interview on VX Underground. I don't know if anybody's ever seen their site, but they've got lots of malware samples and cool stuff. But they had an interview with an actual ransomware operator. They verified it was who they were, but they disguised the name. But this was, out of that interview, this was kind of a breakdown of their profile. They're a sysadmin. Hi, Nick. They were arrogant to being captured. They weren't worried about the FBI capturing them. They were more worried about Mandiant finding them. So that goes a lot to say about Mandiant. They were a pen tester. They were a consultant. They were one of the negotiators on the other end. What cracked me up, and it was at the end of the interview, throughout the whole interview, they're saying how much they hate America. They hate Americans. We're arrogant and everything else. But at the end, the interviewer goes, is there anything you'd wish that how your life had been? And they go, I wish I was born in America because I probably would be working at a company like Google right now. And it just blew me away. But that, again, it goes to that mentality of how they were and what they were doing over there. But you can find that on vx-underground.org. So we actually got some advice from Conti. And this was through some of the conversations with regards to one of the attacks. Restrict access to servers for regular users because they were basically getting in on one person's system and then working their way over to an actual server that, like an active domain controller or something else, where they were able to gain access. They talk about use different passwords because a lot of the times they may have been using a shared password or a common password, in which case once they figured out the one, they were able to use it for all the others. Make sure EDR is installed on every computer, whether, pick your flavor. Set up more of a complex storage system. Don't make it all on one flat network, and protect your LSAS dump on all your computers. That's coming from Conti, and from cybersecurity professionals. We're going around and we're talking, make sure you got your backups, do this, do that. They're coming in, they're getting specific because this is how they're getting in every single time. And of course, when we end up, they even talk about checking your admin's activity once a week because they're able to create their own admin account or they're able to take over one of the admin accounts. And if you're not checking that activity, you'd certainly miss something. So in the event that you do get hit with ransomware, we always say you can restore from a backup, decrypt your files using a third party, which, by the way, when I encrypted my files, I got my hands on the decryptor just in case I really screwed something up, but I didn't, thank goodness. It took 5 hours to decrypt the encrypted files, 10 seconds to a minute to encrypt it, and over 5 hours to decrypt that 40 gig. You can do nothing, lose all your data, start all over, kind of like what happened in the LA school district, or you negotiate and pay the ransom. But when we look at the best practices, we always talk about training your users, and they even said it as well. Train the people that work there to be able to spot those phishing tests. And if you need a company to do security awareness and training, I know a really good one. Backups, talked about that. Segment the network. Don't have that flat network. Figure out what your critical assets are within your organization. Isolate those, protect that with MFA, additional firewalls, reduce the access for your users, principal least privilege. Remove internet-facing RDP. Put it behind a firewall, use a VPN, but having it sitting right directly on the internet is just an invite for them to come in. Keep up with patches. As we saw, you got Conti like to use those 3 particular ones, and they were successful for them. And incident response and tabletop exercises. This is a great way to be able to, get everybody on board, but get everybody in the organization that's going to be involved in that incident response, whether your PR team, your CEO, the CISO, IT managers, the business, getting them together, making sure that everybody understands what the plan is and being able to move forward. I've had insurance on here for a while. I'm thinking I may have to take it off again because I know insurance is not as lucrative as it used to be, and it's a lot harder. But because I remember in 2020, 2021, that was kind of thing. Go get insurance and then they'll pay the ransom. And so then the cyber criminals said, okay, let's go after the insurance companies. And then they got a whole list of new people to go target. So as we look at all, we deal with these computers the systems and the computers on a daily basis. Anybody know what you call a computer that sings? Adele. Got a couple more laughs on that one. All right. So some additional resources as I wrap up here before we take any questions. So shameless plug, know before. We have our ransomware hostage rescue manual. So in the event you get hit, hopefully you already have your plan in place, but we do have our hostage rescue manual, kind of take you through the steps. But a good book, a great book out there, Ransomware, what do you call it? Protection Playbook, written by Roger Grimes. I work with Roger, just to be transparent, but it's a great book. I got to tech edit it. Really great information in there. But as we look at ransomware and we continue, with what we've got in our homes, is this what's next? Are they going to start targeting all the IoT devices in our home, our fridges, our stoves, the cameras? We've seen attacks on the cameras already, but this fun little comic of if you don't pay up the ransom, we're going to leave the heat on in the middle of the summer. So I don't know if anybody heard, but Spider-Man and Wonder Woman are going into business together. Their business is called Amazon Web Services. So, wah, wah, wah. There you go. So, I produce a podcast with KnowBe4. I'm not the host. I'm just the guy behind the scenes. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I have more fun producing it anyway because I get to work with all these awesome guests that we've had. New episode came out this morning. You can find it on all your favorite podcasting platforms. But we interviewed Tanya Jenka, who is She Hacks Purple in the community, AppSec. We had a guy last month, Jean-Michel, as a party. Excuse me. Blockchain. Fantastic thing on blockchain. And we've had other folks dealing on storytelling, security culture. So that's my shameless plug to go check it out. Like I said, new episode dropped today. So I want to thank you all for your attention and time this morning. And I, again, appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. And I think, do we have time for questions? Yeah. Okay. In the back. Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. And I think if they hadn't disbanded, and they still may be working towards doing it, they're always working on things. They've still got all their money. We could see something like that. We could see it would be, the sheep in the wolf's clothing of, hey, we're launching the ransomware, but we can tell you how to, fix it. But they're, like I said, they're constantly evolving their code as well. And so they may be the ones making it available for having the other decryptors. Because we've seen with other cyber criminal groups, when they've attacked them or they've broken up, that their decryptors have been posted online as well. But that is certainly one option that may occur. We still may see a different kind of darknet form, or they come up with their own cryptocurrency. Oh. And that's a possibility as well. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, they're basically helping you cover the costs. Right. I'll admit I don't have a strong opinion on it. I think, essentially we're dealing with organizations that, get caught with their pants down, so to speak, and nobody wants that. I gave a similar talk at Gartner the other day, and I was chatting with folks afterward, and I generally was asking, what is it that scares you about ransomware? We know what we need to do, but is the fear of getting hit, even though you've got all this set up. And so you have the insurance to protect you just in case it does happen, because we all know anything in security is not 100%. So you're always having that risk that's there. So whether you're using an escrow or you've got insurance or you've got some other way to help carry that load, I have to imagine that the fear is certainly around, getting hit and then not knowing what to do. Well, not knowing what to do, I think a lot of us, those that are in that position that can go through and plan and have that playbook and be prepared and go through those exercises, that takes care of a lot of that. So in the event it does happen, do you have the technology that can help spot it and stop it, those kind of things. So I wasn't kidding. I do have a YouTube channel where I have my dad joke videos. So cool. Alrighty. Well, it's 11 o'clock on my clock. I don't know where Nick went. I don't know if he's coming back up or did he just leave me here? Let's see. What else? Anybody know why you can't use the word beef stew as a password? It's not stroganoff. Who are my Windows users in here? Handful. Okay. Do you know what a computer and an air conditioner both have in common? They're both useless when you open Windows. So here's one. Here's one for that. Anybody know who owned the first computer? It was Adam and Eve. It was an Apple. It had 1 byte, low memory, and then the whole thing crashed. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll be around this weekend. Thank you for the big round of applause.
This talk was a part of our 2022 Secure West Virginia Lucky 13 conference. If you would like more information about this talk or our speaker, check the description below. And if you enjoyed the content, consider liking and sharing this video. For more information on Secure West Virginia, or you want to stay updated with the latest upcoming events, follow us on Twitter at SecureWVCon or visit our website securewv.org. We would also like to thank our 2022 sponsors for being a huge part of Lucky 13's success.